Hey.
I don't remember me, but
I do. Yes. Hey there.
I saw you back at the
Yeah.
school
For
conference.
Yes.
all your information.
I do remember.
I'm so glad to see you.
Good, thank you.
Not to discourage any of you from being here, but we do have 2 sessions of these. So if you don't want to stand in the back for 45 minutes, you can wait and come back at 2:50, and it'll be the exact same thing all over again. Just so you know. But you're more than welcome to stay if you want. But we do have 2 of these exact same workshops going on today. This is beautiful of this design. Other than that, more than welcome.
Awesome. All right, let's get started. All right, my name is Dr. Corey Gilbert. I'm a professor at Corbin University, and I have the honor to speak with you today. So I'm excited. I get to talk about sex and stuff like that, so I always enjoy that. It's interesting the journey that I've taken over the years to end up in a place where I'm basically talking about sex all the time and dating and relationships, being the person that didn't date and didn't have sex till I was 28 and got married and all that kind of stuff. And God has got a sense of humor. And now what I actually get to do is I get to sit and talk with people as a therapist, private practice. I've been doing that for 20 years. And then as a professor, dealing with a lot of junk. And basically what I've done over the years is it's gravitated towards the stuff that people don't want to talk about. So I deal mostly with sexual abuse and trauma and a lot of marriage issues and dysfunction and affairs. And I look at you and I think about your future. Just like my daughter's sitting here in the front. And when I look at some of you, I picture her there one day and I get scared. And then when I'm teaching at Corbin and I look at these young ladies who are 20-something and I'm like, wow, my daughter's going to be there one day. What I wish for her is that she has someone to talk to, just like I get to be the person that talks to someone else at that other stage, different stage of life. So what this led to was I actually wrote this book. I can't say that. This book is for parents, teaching parents how do I have the talk. It's actually going beyond the talk because what I've noticed from a lot of years and years of teaching human sexuality, that this stuff is just not talked about. What I've even come to really realize is it's not just not talked about. If our parents neglect getting to those topics and someone else does, we tend to believe whatever those first few things that we hear, which is usually from where? From friends and porn and school and that kind of stuff. It's interesting to see where we gather that information. So today I want to talk about dating and relationship building because this has actually been a passion of mine. Actually, prior to getting married, I was actually already teaching this dating class. When I met my wife, I was actually working at equallyyoked.com. You probably never heard of it. It was actually a dating service in a lot of big cities, and this was in Dallas, Texas. And I would teach this class on healthy dating and relationships. It was kind of based on the Song of Solomon. And so since then, I've kind of stripped it of the Song of Solomon because what I actually realized was if we're not careful, an easy thing that we do with Scripture is we make it say what we want it to say. And so we twist things to make it sound good to fit whatever we've already decided it's going to say. And I actually had a problem with that. And that actually my theology really, really matters, what I believe. Now, what I want you to be able to do today during this time, we're not going to probably have time to get to it, but actually here's a good one. This is Sex Ed 101. I think it's time we have sex talk. And what do we say? Dad, we want to know. It's true. When we get to that point of having the sex ed talk, it tends to be a different story, and the parents are learning a whole bunch of stuff they didn't know that they needed to know, and it's kind of scary, and it's changing so fast. Or here's sex education. Sperm is released and bonds with the egg. Stop loving the word penis. Pictures of STDs. And so actually 16 years ago, I introduced this class at this private Christian university in Georgia. It's where I was taught before. a class called Human Sexuality, and it has been packed ever since. It's been 16 years. Came here to Oregon, same thing. I've been teaching this class, Human Sexuality, walking through a biblical sexual ethic. What does the Bible say about contraception? What does the Bible say about masturbation? So each week is a theology of talking through this stuff that my kids have attended since they were 3 or 4. So we talk about, in my house, we talk about pornography probably every day. We talk about these things so that we're moving stuff out of this operating system, your unconscious, where a lot of us make really dumb decisions, into the conscious, which is taking every thought captive. And then even more powerful, when we start talking it through, it becomes that element of confession. There's something powerful in that a lot of you are doing now because you actually have key people in your life that you're trusting, which is a really hard thing to do. Here's what I think we do with sex. Really what sex is a drug. A lot of you that are already having sex, it's a drug. It's not relationship driven. If you look at any porn, it's actually driven by something you do, not a relationship. And the design was actually made to be about relationship. It was made to be 2 people that came together, and it was because of the relationship. This is a kind of icing on the cake. Instead, we start with that, and we kind of hope it lasts. Like divorces, we fall out of love. We'll fall back in. You learn to love someone. And the honest truth, I've worked with a lot of mixed orientation marriages. So couples where one of them is having gay affairs. And it's amazing how if they die to themselves and that desire outside of their marriage, and they just turn inward into their marriage, all of a sudden something changes. They don't become heterosexual. They learn to love their spouse, usually their wife. It's beautiful, actually. A lot of what we are capable of is a lot more than we realize when we get the data of my emotions off the table, my attractions. Like whatever I'm attracted to is actually bad data. Some of you are actually probably attracted to certain kind of guys or certain kind of girls that get you into trouble. And you know who I'm talking about. If you keep dating the same person over and over, and it's like they're always tempting me and pushing me in directions I don't want, or they're really bad for me, it's like, then the problem isn't necessarily like them, like that is them. It's my radar, if you will, needs some adjusting. When I met my wife, one of the most critical pieces of that story was me getting key people in our life, kind of this vetting process, letting them speak into me and saying yes or no whether this is a wise next step. So the question I would have for you would be, do you have those people in your life that are the vetters of who you should or shouldn't be with? Because what actually, in Georgia, I was known as the guy that broke couples up and doing premarital counseling. It's like, I never did that. They would come in and I would hold the mirror up and I would go, see? And they would run. I never once said you shouldn't be together. But that's what became known as kind of the guy that broke them up. No. So then I would hear other couples who got married and they would go, yeah, we didn't want to come do premarital with you because we were afraid you'd break us up. And I'm like, if I can do that, the world's going to eat you alive. So you want people in your life that are actually going to shoot straight, hold up the right mirror, be honest. And that's that community piece, which is really, really critical. So this is where I land with most of what I talk about and teach and my own study is, why is a biblical sexual ethic important? What does that even mean? My choices are based off something, some value out there. And if it's based off me, we're going to get ourselves into trouble. What is it going to be based off of? Is it going to be this capital T truth? But then what does that mean? How do I understand what does the Bible say and what is going to actually help me be wise? If I actually want that. And what scares me for many of you is, do you really want that? Do you really want to be wise? Or you just want what I want it kind of thing? It's just really scary. Titus 2, teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-control. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live. Then they can train the younger women to love their husbands and children and to be self-controlled and pure. Similarly, encourage the young men to be self-controlled, live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. I sense a theme that many of us don't want to actually hear. But there's something about this the way that I interpret data, and that's kind of, again, the way that I put it for this information around us, attractions and desires, it's just data. If I leave it in my operating system, it's amazing how I feel out of control. But if I take every thought captive and I start choosing, it's amazing how I have a very different outcome, potential outcome. Now, another whole subject we could spend hours on is actually, but what about abuse? Actually, ironically, one of my most favorite things to work with. The amount of women I've walked through sexual abuse with, it's horrifying. And the results are incredible. Why? Because God is a God that's a redeemer. But Satan loves the darkness. So if we can just keep that person trapped and quiet, it's amazing how many people in their 40s that I've dealt with who are just now telling their story. And in their 40s, they're facing up to something that happened to them when they were a teenager. And their husbands are going, oh, now you make sense. All these years of silence and actually hurting alone, now they get to share it. And something really beautiful is born. And trauma is one of those real things. Because the honest truth about the trauma piece in this room, if you really actually kind of parsed it out, the numbers are 1 in 2 women and 1 in 3 men. The data we've heard is 1 in 4 and 1 in 6 based off self-report. And then you add in all the other not self-report, they don't identify that as trauma. Ladies in here, half of you most likely have actually been through some kind of something you shouldn't have been through. A third of the guys too. What's annoying about the guys, this is the hard one, is we breed guys to think sex is always supposed to be a good thing. So they don't see that when that happened, oftentimes that changed their life forever and they don't understand why. Because their brain is trying to tell them that it's okay. And then fast forward in life and all these choices and they don't understand. So one of the things that's been really cool working with people is to see that when I address those things and I look back and I get my timeline straight and I understand my story, my life changes. That awareness, that knowledge, it's data. But then it still comes back to I have to make choices, which is really, really hard. You're in this stage of life right now of incredible choice. Like it's exciting to think of the lives you're going to get to live and the adventures you're going to get to have. But fast forward, because I teach, college age, how many graduate from college and are still stuck in that same job after college, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later? Or stuck in something that they actually hate. 70% of Americans, so this is your future if you don't change this, 70% of adults hate their jobs. Like, is that what you want? The data on marriage, though, is the exact opposite. The data on marriage has never been 50% divorce rate. It's what we've heard forever. Shanti Feldon did her research and said, no, not true. Here's the actual numbers. At the highest, it was in the 30%, 33%. And if you actually have these few things, a college degree, don't live together, and are part of a church, it decreases into the teens. There's something about these different things that actually can help protect us from ourselves in a sense, and what happens. And so your story is actually a really key part of this. You're writing it right now. You've probably heard that our prefrontal cortex isn't developed till 25. If you haven't heard that, I've heard that said a lot. That's kind of worded wrong. It doesn't all of a sudden at 25 appear. It's developing. It's growing. It's a muscle you have to exercise right now. So being able to have that ability to choose and to have that kind of vetting process internally, but it's also done externally with community. Some of you have great parents that help you do that. Some of you don't. Some of you actually have friends that you probably need to change because they're not healthy. I remember a couple of times I've come home and my wife has said, I need you to not have dinner with that guy anymore. Someone I worked with. So every time you have lunch with him, you come home negative and you hate everything about the world. As in, back to what Grandma said, our friends actually matter. Who we hang around actually shapes us. Doesn't matter what your age is. So this is really, really important. So some things that actually I would say you need to know really well is learning basic human sexuality. That's a critical one. I'm having to push this on college students, and I almost laugh that I'm having to teach something as basic that shouldn't be basic. Like this should be taught at a younger age. Again, that's why I wrote that book, was for moms and dads to say, no. You start this when they're 2. Whatever time we think we should have the talk, back it up 4 or 5 years. If they're gonna go to school anywhere, back it up 5 or 6 more years maybe. Prepare them, don't protect them. Don't just protect them. The theology of sex. What in the world does this mean to our body, to our heart, to that long-term us or sense of self? The brain in sex is awesome. Just the neuroscience. The more I learn about the neuroscience of how our brain works in relation to relationships and sex, God is an amazing designer. And basically the filter I run it through is if I don't understand something, it goes back through that same filter. God, what did you intend in this? What was the purpose behind that? Some of you guys who are so like with hormones, what's the purpose? It seems like a complete setup to fail. Okay, we need to figure that out. God, what did you intend by that? And I would say the key word that his intention by that was stewardship. If I can't steward this here when I'm single, I'm not going to probably steward it very well when I'm married. If I can't steward money when I'm younger, I'm probably not going to steward it better when I'm older. It's kind of all these things we have to learn how to manage, if you will. Knowing the brain of love, a theology of marriage as well, because this will impact all of you in some way, whether you get married or not. What is your belief about whether I should or shouldn't get married? That's a big one that's happening right now as well. And building your personal ethos, having a plan, committing to live by a plan. Are you going to be someone that leads by example with assertiveness and confidence? This is the things that I talk a lot to parents about. But you're doing that too. You guys are on the front lines of ministry in the context of your life. The schools you're in, the people you hang around. You're not just this bystander. You're someone of influence. And I hope you see that. I hope you see that the power you have right now is incredible to influence other people towards good or evil. And men and women are very different on purpose. And men have an ability to use who they are for good or evil, and so do women. That's another whole entire conversation as well. Gender is another really big one. What does this even mean anymore? I could ask that question right now, and we could probably spend a couple of days unpacking that alone. A lot of what I do in my own counseling practice is I work with people either transitioning genders or who are deciding whether to transition. I do a lot with parents who really are struggling with how do I love my child, and that's really the focus, is how do you love your child no matter what they choose and what they do. This gets difficult, it gets messy, it gets so personal, because some of you might be in that same boat as well. This is the reality we're in right now with gender. You've probably seen this before. If not, it will probably make a lot of sense. You have this gender identity, womanness, manness, gender expression, biological sex, sexually attracted to, and romantically attracted to. It's really, really complex. Thing is I actually think it's kind of supposed to be complex. I actually agree with our culture in the sense of we should be asking these hard questions about gender. If I were your age today, I don't want to know where my story would go from your age. Who I was and what I was struggling with at your age today, in this society today. Everything I owned and wore was pink and purple, and I was a music major in college. Everything was extremely over the top, to again use stereotype, as feminine as could be. And it's funny because I didn't have the culture today, so I had the culture of 20-something years ago. So I didn't know that there were other questions to ask, if you will. I'm glad. And I continued on. Now, fast forward to 28, I meet my wife, and what's funny is she is so the guy, it's not even funny. Because God's design is perfect, by the way. And all of a sudden, these pieces fit together in my head of, I'm the emotional basket case. I cry at everything. Like sonogram, when I saw the picture, this little black and white little picture of my kids, I'm in tears, and my wife's like, okay, now what? she has our kids and she's got this baby and she's like, okay, now what? Like, she's so not emotional, it's hilarious. She's the one with the boxes and she's analytical. She used to work in the legal field and I'm the shrink. God's design is perfect. And so for me, with the gender piece, it's figuring out, who are you? What's in God's perfect design? How did he design you? Because it's perfect. We're the ones that go messing it up, especially when we try to play games with it. Oh, shoot, I did put that picture in there. That was me in high school. Yeah, I love bullets. I wish they'd come back. Just kidding. Yeah, there's my... I grew up in Chile as a missionary kid, came back to America, and all of a sudden I'm this white redhead who didn't stand out like for anything, and growing up I did. And I'm having to, Mom take me everywhere in the car, and so I wanted my freedom, so I bought a motorcycle, never having been on one. And now I ride year round, and I love my Harley, but that's not a Harley. I was looking for myself. I was trying to find myself, like some of you are still and probably will for a while. This is actually not abnormal. But for some reason, we've almost kind of made it abnormal. I've gotten multiple calls in the last few months from friends of mine, former students who are now raising kids, who are asking this question. My 3-year-old says he's not a boy, he wants to be a girl. I'm like, just rewind 5 or 6 years ago, you wouldn't be asking me these questions a few years ago. But you're asking very different questions today. And your actions right now are going to really impact the future of that child's life. The overreactions are some of the worst ones. But when you're the one with the pocketbook, when you go buy certain things, you change their life as well. Like one day, my daughter Miley was standing on a stool and she was stirring something. And she's like, I'm doing women's work. And I was like, who says? So I just started going through the list of who are all the famous cooks and painters and artists and musicians, and just going through. For some reason, we have certain stereotypes in our head that get us into trouble. So this is a time to deconstruct some of that and to really unpack that in a great way, I think, that's actually really encouraging, and actually really asking this question here, what does the Bible say? Which we actually don't have a lot of answers to on some of these, which gets frustrating. I just realized I'm on the wrong one. I want to show you the model that I actually use. And by the way, I just realized I was on the wrong slide thing. If you actually, when I want to gather these, if you want to actually send questions, if you go to that sli.do Slido, type in PDX, you can actually submit questions, not for something we're going to do today, so you can do it even later on your smartphone. This will be a way for us to gather even more. Where are you at? What are you struggling with? I'm not going to put these up here, but others will be able to see them, so don't put your names. But this is a really important thing. Where are you? So the way that I've done this kind of speaking many times in the last few months is it's been all Q&A. All just, where are you at? Today we're going to spend more time looking at kind of a model that I want you to see about actually dating and relationships. This is my other two sons, Alex and Blaze. We're a Boy Scout family. We go camping and backpacking and do stuff like that. And this is where we're about to head on a trip. Blaze is kind of crazy. If you think about this weight that we carry around, which is probably about 40 pounds most of the time for me and a little bit less for the younger kids. But this is some of the cool things we get to go be around and do. This is over up in the north or east of Eugene, the McKenzie River, I think it was. The power of that too. The power of that river and the way he's so close to it, which his mom kind of freaked out about later on with the video and pictures. And that backpack can just tip him over really quick too, if he were to lean the wrong way. But some of you, when you walk into marriage one day, this is going to be you. You're going to be someone who actually the amount of weight on your shoulders because of not only things that may have happened to you, but the choices you made. So what I kind of want us to focus today is to really think about a model of what does this whole dating thing look like? Because I think it's a mess. And these words that we use, even like the word dating, is unhelpful, if you will. One of the things I tell my kids is you can start dating, and they know this from really young, you start dating around your senior year of college. Not 16. Senior year of college. And they know I'm saying it a little bit facetiously, in the sense that you could meet someone along the way, but until you actually have the pocketbook and the car and all those other things in place, there's not much point. Like, what's the purpose behind building that relationship? Knowing that it's also going to get more physical the longer we're together. So we're going to look at that too in a second. For some of you, though, this is what your mind looks like. You couldn't find something if you had to. It's as cluttered and messy as you can imagine. And so you're actually trying to sort things out theologically and emotionally and you name it, and you can't figure out what's up or what's down. This is why we need one another. This is why we've got to latch on to people that actually care about us. When my wife and I went to this certain couple's house and we sat down with them and said, you know what? We're kind of thinking about maybe possibly getting married. If they had even hesitated, she would have walked away that moment. Instead, they were like, yes, they were so excited. And it's funny that I actually was even say she was more in tune to what they said over even our parents. And we have great parents. That data mattered too, but there was something about these certain people that we had in our life that their opinion really, really mattered. And this becomes us. This is our theology if we're not careful. What is true sexual freedom? Sexual freedom is the emancipation of sexual expression from arbitrary shackles prescribed by tradition and sometimes even by law. Expression often shunned and ruled against includes celibacy, non-marriage, open discussion of human sexuality in public forums, and community living. This is what a lot of us are kind of fighting for in some way, or it's been talked about a lot. This is actually sexual freedom. It's this kind of stuff. The most abusive relationship we know of, yes, 50 Shades of Grey. If you watched Big Mouth, I'm very, very sorry. It's one of the most disgusting, the masturbation monster and all the other portrayal of something. The more you consume that, the more you're changed. Because you don't see sexuality and gender and relationships and marriage in the same light because of the data that now you hold. This idea of friends with benefits. Polyamory is on the increase, where I'm going to make up my own version of relationships. 2 or 3 guys or girls and 2 or 3 or 4, and there's a ton of different ways to do this. That's our current culture. It's actually more prevalent here in the Pacific Northwest than anywhere else in the country right now. We have students at Corbin who decide to actually get married, and their friends up here in Portland actually are appalled. Why would you ever settle for something so archaic? Which is very telling of ethic, my belief system. Victoria Woodhull, I am a free lover. I have an inalienable, constitutional, and natural right to love whom I may, to love as long or short a period as I can, to change that love every day if I please. Well, think about that. It's kind of scary, that model of life. So I want us to talk through this bridge. So I want you to picture this bridge, and you're going to actually, the other side of this bridge is marriage, which the irony is life just only begins at that point. It's just different now. You know, it's funny, I think about some talking about their wedding, and it's like they're preparing for this wedding day, and it's like, that's just, I call it the debt day. Your big, big day of debt. It's a big party. How much have you spent preparing for after that? And how little tends to be done, because this is not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. But it's actually incredible if you marry well. A verse that has really guided me is this one. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. If we really believe that, what he wants to do in your life and in my life is way bigger than any of our dreams and any of our human pictures of life. But yet, we get caught up in those if we're not careful. So these words dating and courtship, you've probably heard the word courtship, haven't you? A lot of different definitions. I want to give you some totally different words to think about when it comes to this, because it really helped me kind of put some things in order and to give me some clear lines as to what I'm choosing. And so here's 3 words. And like a good Baptist sermon, they all have C's. I think they must have put a committee together. This is from Doug Rosenau and Michael Todd Wilson, good friends of mine that built this. But connecting, coupling, covenanting. Covenanting is obviously marriage. Coupling is kind of that, it's the coupling up, but connecting is all of our relationships. The people you get to know here and in your youth group and church and school and neighborhood, everywhere. There's those people you connect with. I honestly believe we would have better marriages if we actually learned to do this connecting better. Yeah, I know like the other day my wife said to slow down in this neighborhood, and I'm like, why? There's never any kids out playing anyway. Like, it's kind of sad, isn't it? Like, we're in playing Xbox. We're in our own little world. We used to use driver's license as the way to know that a person has now moved from childhood to adulthood, in a sense. This rite of passage. You know what it is now? It's not a driver's license. The age that people are getting driver's license is older and older now. Smartphones, which they're getting when? You're getting when? Too soon? Elementary school. Middle school. It's crazy. I call these porn portals, by the way. Oh, you love your child. Here's porn. 3 clicks away. It's terrifying. Like, it's just terrifying what we have access to right there. I open Safari, click on Google, type in sex, porn, whatever, go, and I click on images or video, and my life is never the same. Actually, I actually wish it was just images, because what most of you have probably consumed is not images of nudity. It's graphic video, and you don't unsee that stuff. Some of the new porn right now is actually becoming more and more prevalent is men who have transitioned. So they're biologically male with a penis, but they've taken hormones and they've grown breasts. So now they have both. And they're all over each other, and that's on the increase. Why we're trying to always push the envelope, which is really scary. Don't do this, obviously, please. But if you Google any cartoon, kids cartoon, porn, there's a version of it in pornography. Well, there's a My Little Pony porn. There's everything. It's disgusting. And many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this shapes this connecting stage. It will seriously affect the others, or if we ever even get to the others. But it affects this. More men in their teens and 20s now have erectile dysfunction. They can't have an erection with a normal human because they're so desensitized from the stuff they've consumed from pornography. There's a reason why multiple states now have deemed it a health crisis. So there's momentum of some hopefully good changes. Here in the connecting stage, this is the friendships. That one didn't start with C. The friendship. You have these, and we're going to put some other words here in a minute to kind of help organize this. But this coupling stage, it's these 3 words: considering, confirming, committing. So if you're in a relationship right now, what I would ask you to do is to kind of think about, where would you put yourself? Would you put yourself, you and that person, and we're just in the considering stage, or we're in the more of that engaged to be engaged stage, or we're actually engaged? And then marriage. The goal would be that only one person walks across that bridge. That would be the dream, really. Like, where would you draw that line? Where would you draw that line so that I don't want people to know my story? Because part of this considering confirming is actually sharing my heart, sharing my pains, sharing my mistakes, so that no one can ever walk into my life, my marriage, and share with my wife something that I haven't already told her. There's wisdom in that. But yet I get a lot of pushback from people all the time. Hebrews 13:4, let the marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. What does that mean? This is something you protect today. And I'll show you kind of in a minute. Actually, here it is. This is something that I was doing when I met my wife. I learned this and I was actually teaching it, and so then it was one of those, all right, practice what you preach, punk. So our first few months, this is what I actually said to her. I don't know if you're the person God has for me to marry, but I want you to know that you're the type of woman I would enjoy spending my life with. I like being with you, and I'm open to seeing if this relationship goes somewhere. If you want to back out of our dating relationship right now, that's all right. You owe me nothing but honesty. Every few weeks, I would bring this back up. It's very countercultural, the way we live our life. Where we have people saying, I'll die if you leave me. I'll kill myself if you leave me. And the amount of couples that are held hostage because you're playing with fire. Another one here, if you discover after a few dates that a young woman is not the type of person that you want to spend your life with, tell her as gently as possible, and please don't text them. Be honest about your feelings and forthright about your intentions. Be honest sooner than later. Yet, I would say that many of you might be dating someone right now with no marriage in sight, because you're not there yet, and you're playing games. Because you're probably also crossing physical boundaries where you really are playing games and playing with fire. And so having that model of what I choose not to do to protect myself from myself is really, really, really important. So let me add 3 more words to that same picture here. Connecting, we have this word sexuality. During the coupling, these erotic sexual behaviors, and then covenanting true sex. Now the Bible is actually very clear about one thing that's actually in this true sex. What is it? Starts with an I. Can't say it. Intercourse. Intercourse. It's also very clear about not having a hint of sexual immorality, so good luck with dealing with that one. But what I'm going to actually talk to you about, though, this right here, if you think of the sexuality piece, you are actually male or female in relationship with others. There's still something sexual there. We just don't like to use that word because it sounds really creepy. It's a stewardship thing. How you are, how you present yourself as male and as female in all relationships. Again, it's this idea of you can use this for good or evil. And so you have this kind of all the sexual, all relationships, they're that sexual in nature in the sense of, like, I remember this counseling relationship I had with a young lady. She had been sexually abused from about 10 years old until 18 when she went to college by her brother. And then she would sit in my human sexuality class and just cry every week for 3 hours. And then we would process after class every single time. Which, by the way, she's now happily married and actually has our dog, which is funny. But it's been an amazing, my wife ended up mentoring her, and it was just an incredible relationship. But her idea, her concept, and her theology was all messed up. And then as she was introduced to stuff that she's going, why did people not tell me this stuff? She started finding that new theology, but also a freedom to have boundaries. But she sat in my office one day and she shared this for the first time. And I looked at her and I was like, okay, you hate all men. Do you know I'm a guy? She's like, she kind of froze. I was like, do you realize that now I could hurt you with that information? And she's like, yeah. It's like, may I be an example of Christ in your life. One of the things that I have found more often than not is some of you end up being that little C Christ in someone else's life. That, wow, I never knew someone could treat me like that. I never knew we could have those kind of boundaries. I never knew we could actually be close and have a relationship and not have to do that. My whole world gets changed. And that's the goal. And it starts with sexuality in general, with how we relate to all people. And then there's this middle one, this erotic sexual behaviors, that it's almost like there's all these things we do when we're dating, but we don't talk about. There's one that we do that it confuses me. It's called kissing. Like, it's almost like there's permission to do that, but all the other stuff, well, just don't talk about it. I'm like, kissing is meant to do one thing, and it's meant to frustrate. Hey, let's get your engine all revved up and then let's walk away. Yeah, that's really nice. That's really dumb, actually. It's funny how some prostitutes actually say that they'll do everything but kissing. Data to take into consideration. What do I do? What are these boundaries? Here's what I want you to do. This is true sex and other things that might as well be. What if you, we do this in church, we make a list of, don't touch wherever bathing suit's covered, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know any verses that say thou shalt not pet over or under thy clothing or anything like that. And so we just kind of do whatever we're going to do in the darkness. And I'm like, Satan actually really enjoys that space. What if? What if your choices, were to move as much of the stuff that we probably would see put in this blue box into the true sex box? Why? Because I want to protect what I want to experience later. I'm choosing that. Because I can get something today that will damage them and myself for the future. Or I can protect them and myself and have a very different future. Most of you men can walk away. Women can't. Not only from the STDs and all that stuff, but the most feared STD ever is what? The most feared STD? Pregnancy. Girls don't walk into the crisis pregnancy center going, do I have some deadly illness? It's, am I pregnant or not? We don't see these little children as beautiful gifts. My sister's single mom. She's 18 now in college. It's like, he's not a mistake. Because God's perfect. And God has a plan. And how do we, it's heavy. How do we steward this well? Well, it's through boundaries, a word that we don't want to hear, a word that we don't want to talk about. And so if you look at these stages, connecting these friendships, this determines a lot of what we do or don't do as we consider someone and we move them to confirming and then possibly to committing to that engaged and then to covenanting. Now dating, this word dating, actually the way that I word this or the way I define it is, what if you date one person today and another person tomorrow and then another person the next day? That's actually what dating used to be. No strings attached, no big, deep, dark bearing of the soul, no touching at all. There's something about that actually. As in right now, what's the most critical thing that you do? It's spend time with people. Groups of people preferably. And the coolest things happen when it's not intentional actually. When you're at an event, you're doing something and you're sitting around talking and all of a sudden you notice everyone else left and you're sitting there talking with this person still. That's how amazing stories are born. Where you're not trying to control things, you're actually letting God do stuff that only He can do. I mean, I met my wife online on a dating service, which still creeps me out, and she hates to hear that. She hates that part of the story. She emailed me, so I'm like, you made the first move. And she's like, no, I just raised my hand. You took it from there. But after our first date, we shook hands, and she's just like, this guy's a mess. Because I was walking with a cane, and I was told by doctors I'd never work again. I have Crohn's. I was in a complete mess. And again, the future looked very grim. In 10 months of dating, I was in the hospital 3 times. It was a really scary start. Our first year of marriage was me at home, stuck at home, just trying to survive. It was not a love story that you tend to want to write. I don't think I'd be alive if it weren't for her. Because of that partnership, where all 3 of our kids, I was actually sicker than she was when she was pregnant. When Miley was born, this is my little daughter Miley, when she was born, I was bedridden for a year and a half. Where I'd get up and go teach a class and go back to bed. And I have a wife, 2 toddlers, and an infant. I was a worthless husband, it felt like. Yet when we think back on those times, they're not filled full of angst. Why? Because our us was intact, even in the hardest of the hardest times. That's what you're creating. You're creating an us that can handle the hard times. The twice where I've been in the hospital and the doctor said, I don't think he's going to make it. And my wife having to process that. That's what you're dealing with. Those that are going to deal with brain cancers. I've had students that have gotten married and they've had to deal with that. Loss of children, the impossible. That's the future that we don't want to talk about, but you're creating that partnership with someone who gets you and they're on your side and they're your best friends. Because part of the foundation through all this is it better be someone that you can really play with and do life with, not someone you just kind of coexist with. This starts again back here with the connecting and then coupling, covenanting. C.S. Lewis said it this way: it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what it's meant by the offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased. That's what sex is. Sex is stupid in one sense. It's not worth that. But it's icing on the cake in a healthy relationship. All the research points to walking into marriage with a lot of sexual experiences, you actually have a better sex life. And then Christians go, oh, you can't have that. Well, the second half of the study goes, it's got a shelf life. Walking in a marriage without a lot of experience, you learn together and you grow together, and it has a lifetime of, why? Because the focus isn't on sex. The focus is on the relationship, and that's a piece of the puzzle. That's part of why even same-sex marriages and even marriages, heterosexual marriages, where the focus is on the sexual to start, have a very short shelf life. If that's the piece, versus we're in this together no matter what. So if you are dating someone, it's having that relationship actually go through something that shows you the kind of person they are and shows them the kind of person you are. When I was in the hospital, one of the times when we were dating, my wife actually, she said that, so the nurse would come in and I would always they would always leave laughing or smiling. And so my wife's watching this, evaluating who is this guy going to be. And she said, every time they come in, you're so nice to them, and it doesn't matter how much pain you were in, you always made them laugh and smile. When they left, you had a mouth on you, because I hate doctors and I hate hospitals. And she chose to ignore that part and marry me anyway. So that's a good thing. But you're doing this all the time. You're evaluating how they are around their parents and around siblings or around others. And this is a scary but beautiful thing. What is true sexual freedom? It's actual heterosexual marriage. It's bringing 2 sexually different people together. That's the design. And that's another, again, whole can of worms. But limits, boundaries, family, free to feel, enjoy, relax, heal, and hope. One of my favorite parts of this has been to see people's lives change through the healing of marrying well, having someone who's on their team and being patient with them. Serious stewardship and care of others, commitment for life. This is a beautiful, I hope, desire for you entering into marriage with as little baggage as possible and addressing those things that we are carrying, being able to fully enjoy that relationship is true sexual freedom. So being honest, getting people around you that actually care for you, that have your best interest at heart are critical. If you ask your friends and they aren't honest, then they're really not true friends, which is a scary piece of knowledge for us. And there are people in your life, because they've probably brought you here, that actually would, they want to be that person. That's why I love, again, sitting with people and having that trust from someone, because I don't take it lightly. And it's critical to have those people in our life. So I think that's my time. Thank you for putting up with me. Bless you guys.